Most people destroy their own power without realizing it, not because they are weak physically, not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot stop explaining themselves. Every decision becomes a speech, every boundary becomes an apology, every silence becomes uncomfortable, and slowly they train the world to see them as emotionally dependent, because the person who constantly explains themselves is unconsciously asking for permission to exist. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something brutal about human nature. Respect is not given to the most emotional person. Respect is given to the most certain person, and certainty does not beg. It does not panic. It does not desperately seek understanding from everyone around it. Yet modern society teaches the exact opposite. People are trained to constantly defend themselves, to explain why they left, why they stayed, why they changed, why they failed, why they succeeded, why they disappeared, why they said no. And after years of this behavior, they become psychologically exhausted, because explaining yourself is emotional labor, especially when you are explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. That is the trap weak people never escape. They think if they just explain better, people will finally understand them. No. Most people understand you perfectly. They simply do not care. Or worse, they benefit from keeping you emotionally defensive, because a defensive person is easier to control. Look carefully at emotionally powerful individuals. They rarely overreact, rarely over-explain, rarely rush to correct every false perception, because they understand a dangerous truth. People see weakness through emotional urgency. The more desperate you are to be understood, the less powerful you appear. That is why silence unsettles people. Silence signals emotional control, and emotional control is rare. Most humans are impulsive, reactive, emotionally exposed. The average person leaks their entire psychology within minutes, their insecurities, their fears, their jealousy, their need for validation, their desperation to belong. Everything becomes visible, and visibility creates vulnerability. That is why powerful people speak carefully, not because they are shy, because they understand information is power. Every unnecessary explanation gives people access to your emotional structure. And once people understand your emotional structure, they know how to manipulate you. This is why mysterious individuals often appear intimidating. Humans fear what they cannot fully read, and they respect what feels emotionally disciplined. Think about the moments you looked weakest in life. It was probably not when you failed. It was when you desperately tried to explain your failure. Not when someone rejected you, but when you begged them to understand your intentions. Not when someone attacked you, but when you emotionally scrambled to defend yourself. Because emotional scrambling destroys authority. Power requires stillness, calmness, precision. The lion does not turn around every time monkeys scream, but weak people do. Every criticism becomes a personal emergency. Every misunderstanding becomes a courtroom trial. Every accusation becomes something they must emotionally fix. And that constant reaction slowly destroys their presence. Because emotionally reactive people cannot command respect, they can only chase approval. Machiavelli understood that perception controls power, not morality, not fairness. Perception changes based on emotional behavior. When people see you constantly defending yourself, they subconsciously assume weakness exists because certainty does not over-defend. Imagine a king explaining himself to every citizen. Imagine a general emotionally arguing with every soldier. Imagine a wealthy man desperately proving his value to strangers. It looks absurd. Yet normal people do this every day online. They explain their boundaries, explain their choices, explain their ambitions, explain their standards, explain why they disappeared, explain why they no longer tolerate disrespect. And the more they explain, the less others respect the decision. Because explanations invite negotiation. That is something psychologically weak people never understand. Every long explanation sounds like uncertainty, and uncertainty attracts pressure. Humans naturally test uncertain people, push them, manipulate them, challenge them, because emotionally uncertain people usually collapse under pressure. Strong people are different. Their answers are short, controlled, simple. No, I'm unavailable. I changed my mind. I'm leaving. No emotional essay, no guilt, no panic, no need for external permission. That calmness terrifies manipulative people. Because manipulators survive through emotional access, they need reactions, they need emotional leakage, they need guilt, they need insecurity. But emotionally disciplined individuals give them nothing, and nothing frustrates emotional parasites more than silence. That is why some people become angry when you stop explaining yourself, not because you are wrong, but because they lost access to controlling you. The moment you stop emotionally oversharing, you become harder to manipulate, harder to predict, harder to dominate, and suddenly people accuse you of being cold, different, arrogant, detached, good. Because weak people often confuse emotional control with arrogance. They resent what they cannot emotionally influence, and most humans are unconsciously addicted to influence. They want access to your mind, your emotions, your reactions, your fears, your insecurities, your guilt. Because once they have emotional access, they have leverage. That is why silence becomes power. Not loud silence, not fake alpha behavior, not emotional suppression. Real silence. Controlled silence, the type of silence that comes from self-respect, the type of silence that no longer feels the need to convince strangers, because true confidence is not loud, it is stable. And stable people do not emotionally chase understanding. They understand something deeper. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone deserves emotional intimacy. And the moment you realize this, your entire energy changes. You stop arguing, stop defending, stop proving. Stop emotionally performing for people who secretly enjoy watching you explain yourself. Because many people are not listening to understand you. They are listening to measure your insecurity. And every extra word reveals more than you think, especially when spoken emotionally. That is why powerful men throughout history mastered restraint. Not because they lacked emotions, but because they understood emotional exposure has consequences. A calm man sees clearly. An emotional man reveals clearly. And the world studies revealed people. Not respected people. The strongest individuals in any room are usually the least emotionally desperate, and desperation has a sound. It sounds like over-explaining. Blocko too weak people cannot tolerate silence. That is why they constantly talk, constantly explain, constantly react, because silence forces them to confront themselves. And most people are terrified of what exists inside their own mind. So they fill every empty space with noise, excuses, justifications, emotional speeches, endless clarification. But powerful individuals understand something different. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is control. When you stop feeling the need to explain every decision, you reclaim psychological authority, because now your actions speak louder than your emotions. And actions create status, not words. The average person talks about discipline, The powerful person becomes disciplined. The average person explains their ambition. The powerful person quietly builds. The average person announces every plan. The powerful person moves in silence. That difference changes everything, because human beings subconsciously trust results more than explanations. Anyone can talk. Anyone can justify themselves. Anyone can create emotional stories about why life is difficult. But very few people can remain calm while misunderstood. That is real emotional strength. Most people think power is aggression. No, aggression is often insecurity wearing armor. True power is emotional composure, the ability to remain still while others become emotional, the ability to stay silent while others desperately seek validation, the ability to walk away without explaining your value. That is rare, and rarity creates respect. Look at what happens when emotionally weak people face criticism. They instantly panic. They rush to defend themselves. They overtalk, overreact, over-explain. Because criticism threatens their identity. But emotionally disciplined people are different. They understand that not every attack deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves emotional energy. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Sometimes silence is the most powerful answer possible, because silence forces people to sit with uncertainty, and uncertainty psychologically unsettles human beings. Humans crave emotional closure. That is why people keep checking messages, refreshing notifications, obsessing over responses. They cannot tolerate unresolved tension, but powerful individuals use this law strategically. They do not emotionally rush. They do not explain themselves under pressure. They stay composed, and composure creates psychological dominance. This is why calm people naturally appear higher status, even without money, even without fame, even without power. Because emotional stability itself feels powerful. Meanwhile, emotionally reactive individuals always appear fragile, even when they try to act confident. Because energy cannot hide truth, and truth leaks through behavior, especially under pressure. Watch what happens during conflict. Weak people become louder, faster, more emotional, more defensive. They desperately try to win emotionally, but powerful individuals slow down. Their voice remains calm, their words become fewer, their emotions stay controlled, because they understand something dangerous. The person who loses emotional control usually loses the interaction. That is why silence can feel intimidating. Silence signals restraint, and restraint suggests hidden strength. Humans instinctively fear people who appear emotionally self-controlled, because self-control is difficult. Most people are slaves to impulse, slaves to anger, slaves to insecurity, slaves to emotional reactions. So when they encounter someone calm, someone unreadable, someone emotionally grounded, they feel psychological pressure, especially manipulative people. Manipulators depend on emotional reactions. They provoke you hoping for leakage, hoping for insecurity, hoping for anger, hoping for guilt. Because once emotions take control, logic disappears. That is why emotional discipline becomes a weapon. And Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew emotional men are predictable men. Predictable men are controllable men. And controllable men rarely hold power for long. This is why dangerous individuals often appear emotionally detached, not because they feel nothing, but because they refuse to expose everything. Modern culture encourages emotional exposure constantly. Tell everyone how you feel. Express everything. Reveal your entire truth. But unrestricted emotional exposure creates vulnerability, especially in competitive environments, especially around jealous people, especially around people secretly waiting for weakness. And weakness rarely appears physically first. It appears emotionally first. Through over-explaining, over-sharing, overreacting, over-defending. That is how people reveal insecurity. The strongest people understand boundaries differently. They do not feel guilty for protecting their peace. They do not emotionally collapse because someone misunderstands them. They do not explain every absence, every rejection, every refusal, because emotionally mature individuals know something simple. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. Read that again. Most people spend their lives emotionally managing others, trying not to disappoint them, trying not to upset them, trying not to appear rude, trying not to seem selfish, and during this process, they slowly abandon themselves, because people-pleasing destroys identity. Every time you betray your instincts to gain approval, you weaken your presence, and weak presence attracts disrespect. Humans naturally push against people who fear confrontation. That is why over-explainers are constantly tested. People sense uncertainty beneath their words. They sense emotional guilt, and guilt invites pressure. Meanwhile, emotionally solid people create invisible boundaries, not through aggression, through certainty. Their energy says, "This decision is final." No emotional performance, no defensive speech, no attempt to emotionally convince anyone. That level of certainty changes how the world treats you, because certainty feels authoritative, even when people disagree with it. This is why leaders throughout history mastered emotional restraint. Leader who panics creates panic. A leader who over-explains creates doubt. A leader who emotionally reacts loses authority. But calmness stabilizes perception, and perception controls influence. People follow emotional certainty, not emotional chaos. That is why silence often speaks louder than words. A calm pause can dominate an entire room. A controlled stare can create pressure without speaking. A man who walks away without explaining himself often appears more powerful than the man screaming his point emotionally, because emotional desperation always lowers status, and most people never realize how desperate they sound, especially when trying to prove themselves. The need to constantly prove yourself is usually evidence you do not fully believe in yourself. Truly confident individuals do not emotionally market their value every second. They simply move differently, calmly, precisely, quietly, and over time, their results speak for them. That is the final irony. The less you explain yourself, the more people become curious about you, because mystery creates psychological gravity. Humans become obsessed with what they cannot fully access. That is why silence has presence, and presence is power. At the end of the day, most people are not weak because they lack talent. They are weak because they cannot control themselves emotionally. They talk too much, explain too much, reveal too much, and slowly. They give the world access to their mind. But power was never built through emotional exposure. Power is built through control. Control of your emotions. Control of your reactions, control of your words, and most importantly, control of your silence. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that the world does not respect emotional desperation, it respects certainty. So from this moment forward, stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop defending every boundary. Stop proving your value to people who already decided not to see it. And stop interrupting your peace just to make others comfortable. Because the strongest man in the room is rarely the loudest. He is the calmest, the most disciplined, the most emotionally controlled, the man who can walk away in silence without feeling the need to explain why, and in a world addicted to noise. That level of silence becomes power. If this video changed the way you see human nature, subscribe to Power by Silence. Because here, we master psychological power, emotional control, silent status, and the art of moving differently while the world stays distracted. Stay silent, stay dangerous.